Christina. Let's get started. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to give a talk at this important conference. I have been actually interested in biopolitics for over 3 decades. I know there are a number of different definitions of this word. The definition I personally prefer is this definition, where the emphasis is on the role of Darwinian theory of evolution in explaining human political behavior. Not just explaining, but also occasionally predicting and even trying to control it. I know there are also other definitions which may be very different from this one. For example, the definition preferred by Michel Foucault and his followers. I am discussing this point in a special recent book. I'm going to show it. Unfortunately, I'm not going to discuss it in this brief talk. I'd like merely to stress that biopolitics is an interdisciplinary field which is relevant both to political science and biology, should encourage scientists and scholars to draw comparisons between the organization of biological systems and that of human society. And one important, almost universal, ubiquitous structural pattern used by both biological systems and human society alike is called the network structures, which are defined just as any set of nodes or points which are connected by links, also called edges. Network structures include a number of different types. They can be centralized, then they have hierarchies, they have a single central controlling unit, a single pacemaker, or they can be decentralized and distributed. Then again there are 2 options. They can be dominated by competition among their nodes, these are market structures and their analogs, or by cooperation, which then overrides internal competition. These cooperative, decentralized networks will be the subject of my talk. I'd like to point out that in living nature there is a large number of different systems which follow the network structural pattern. These different systems, I call them different network paradigms, and discuss them, in another monograph of mine, this book. Here I'd like only to give you a couple of important examples, one of them being the organization of microbial systems. This is what I call the cellular paradigm, and as you see, these completely flat networks composed of microbial cells, these can be certainly also cells inside a tissue in the human or animal organism, but anyhow, there is no central pacemaker, no dominant element, but this flat structure doesn't prevent very effective coordination of the behavior of the individual cells in it, which is largely based on local contacts among cells, as exemplified by these cytoplasmic bridges. This, by the way, is our little friend Escherichia coli, which lives in our gastrointestinal tract, in our intestine, and whose products, whose neurochemicals directly influence the human brain, influence our social behavior, even our political activities, and therefore is a biopolitical issue in its own right. But let me turn to the organizational side of the matter. As I pointed out, this decentralized structure is based on local contacts, plus we have also long-range coordinating chemical signals. This is known as the quorum sensing system, and it enables each microbial cell to measure the number of other cells in the same population. Depending on whether there are many neighbors or just few of them, the cells, so to speak, decide whether or not to start collective behaviors. A romantic example is a marine bacterium whose molecular lamps are turned on and which only shines in the dark when its population is sufficiently dense, sufficiently concentrated. There is also a thing called a matrix. This is a group of organic substances which actually bind all the cells together and which certainly promote their collective activities, their collective behaviors. As for human analogs, I'd like to point out that a creative interdisciplinary team of any kind might use this pattern creatively, and in this case the individual brains of all network members merge into one super intelligent system, and the human analog of the microbial matrix is just the immaterial set of shared values, common goals, ideas and norms of behavior. There are other biologically important network paradigms. For example, the so-called modular paradigm, which is typical of colonial cnidarians. These are small invertebrate animals which look like hydras, but a hydra, as you know, a hydra is an individual animal, whereas these colonial cnidarians form large networks where each individual still retains some degree of independence and therefore can compete, for example, for food with its neighbors. But irrespective of who gains the food, it invariably ends up in the same collective stomach of the whole colony, which is in the stalk to which all the individual cnidarians are attached. Likewise, we can think about, for example, a club, a think tank in human society where individuals creatively combine their individual competition with cooperation in terms of the general network level project, which is the human analog of this collective stomach, which digests everybody's food. In this case, everybody's ideas. Actually, there are other paradigms, other examples of networks. I'm just listing them here, and I apologize for being not able to discuss them in this brief talk. I'd like to point out that decentralized, distributed networks hold much value in present-day society in terms of in its social, economic, and even political sphere. For example, in business, there's an increasing number of inter-firm alliances in which individual firms form horizontal, non-hierarchical networks. There are also so-called internal networks in which one single enterprise decides to give some degree of independence to its subdivisions, and they then set up an internal network. Finally, networks can be composed not of firms or their parts, but just individual business people, as exemplified by this imaginary network specializing in raising and marketing pedigree cats. As you might see, there's no central boss, no CEO, no managing director. Instead, there are as many partial leaders as there are sub-projects or activities, plus the so-called psychological leader, whose responsibility is maintaining a creative, productive, positive psychological climate and mitigating any internal conflict inside this network. In our digital society, the society we're now watching its process of development around the world, networks gain additional advantages over more traditional hierarchies, these structures over these ones, because networks are light on their feet, they are more dynamic, they more efficiently cope with the new challenges caused by instantaneous information flow, by increasingly long supply chains in terms of supplying both goods and services. Well, and still, networks are not as new as they might seem. They are actually as old as the hills. They are as old as life on this planet itself. They are one of the results of many millions and billions of years of biological evolution. Therefore, networks are of obvious biopolitical relevance. And I'd like to thank you all for your attention, and I hope from my heart that the APLS conference will really be a great success. Okay.